Hello, I'm Philip Creager, and I've previously videotaped selections from a book of poetry called Roses, a Book of Verse. And these were a selection of poems from 1970 to 1989, mostly from the late 80s. Since 1989, I've written a lot of stuff. It's now 2022, and my aim was to put it into a hard copy book, probably to be named, the working title is Fragrance. A certain friend of mine said, that title smells to high heaven. I'm sending my friends Bruno and Slasher to pay him a visit. But no, I've also looked in my notes and written down that I might consider calling it Essence. Anyway, I don't think it's going to get put into hard copy in this lifetime, so I'm videotaping, and there are a lot of advantages, of course, to videotaping, because you can get the feel intended by the author in the recitation, and of course it's visual. Anyway, tentatively, if eventually it gets put into book form, this is the picture of Baba that I wanted put on the cover. Perhaps an unusual choice, but I think of garlands and fragrance. That picture was taken in the East Room of the Tank Building on Mehrabad Hill, perhaps during the Prem Ashram days. So today, I have a somewhat rambling commentary about my poetic process. This is culled, C-U-L-L-E-D, from my previous book, Roses, for the most part. I didn't include it when I videotaped selections from Roses, so I'm doing it now since it pertains just as well to the potential book, Fragrance. Fragrance will be a large amount of poetry, so and including the notes. But today I'm going to just start, before I talk more about the creative process, read a couple of poems from Fragrance. So this one is called The Slave's Prayer. And this poem is both a poem and a prayer, and it's modeled on the Lord's Prayer. And it is for those who aspire only to be the slave of the Divine Beloved. Our Father, who art within us, mercy is your name. May your will be ours, so that this earth becomes our living heaven. Give us this day nothing except you. Forgive us for our wants and what they have created. And may we forgive our wrongdoers. Let us not lead ourselves into temptation, but let us follow your lead to salvation. For thine is the highest freedom, the deepest joy, and the perfect love forever. Amen. After I read this poem in Mandalay Hall for the first time, Meru sent word that she wanted a personal copy, which I sent to her. And the other one I wanted to read from Fragrance is called Love Letter. It's about Mani, and I wrote it after she passed away. I knew a poem was coming, but I didn't get anything. I knew it would come to me. And finally, let's see, she passed away August 19th, 1996. Finally, on February 20th, 1997, it started to come to me. and I realized it could be completed at a certain point, but I felt there was more yet to come. So I waited, and finally, in April 13th, 1997, the rest of the poem came to me. This poem uses the imagery of the sky, Baba being the sun, Mara, the moon that reflects the sun, has stars and birds and things like that in it. It's pretty obvious. I wanted to read something that has relevance. There was a woman named Mabel Ryan who Baba said next time would come back as a Mandali member. She was a close friend of Delia de Leon and Margaret Krask and others, and she died young. After the passing of Mabel Ryan, Baba wrote the following letter to Delia de Leon. I think that it serves as a good setup piece for the following poem written after Mani's passing. Baba wrote, I know how you feel parting with dear Mabel, but Mabel has not parted from you. She is closer to you now than she was or could be before. Love knows no separation, and because you loved her so much, nothing, not even death, as physical separation is called, can break that tie of love there is between you. Meher Baba. So I felt very close to Mani, and that was the thing about at least some of the Mandali. They made you feel like you were their best friend, and the other way around as well. I feel it's because their hearts were so big, everybody was their best friend, because they saw Baba within us. Love letter. Who can write of Mani who is more alive than me or you? Words must fail to measure one whose love light shone just for the sun. Yet your words made us feel blessed, dear eastern star, scribe to the west. Sparkling pointer toward our goal, in speechless rhythm I extol, stardust caught while passing by, in silent journey through night sky. Spriteful dancer to his tune, delightful guardian of his moon, sister of the avatar, the sister to us all you are. None so talented I've met, so in this world you were, and yet, nestled safely in his arms, removed from Maya's empty charms. Special in your eyes we seemed, your eyes reflecting love that beamed. What you saw was him inside. From your sight he did not hide. So much love from you we felt, and what a card in you he dealt. Playful, youthful, joyous too. Obedient and wise, it's true. Grace and wit and charm most sweet, your gifted life stayed at his feet. Love like this must take one home, and that is why our bird has flown. Mani dear, so present here, now that you've left, you're yet more near. Twinkle, twinkle, crown jewel star. We don't wonder where you are. Everywhere with him you'd be, and closer than the things we see. Up above, yet with us still, inspiring pilgrims skyward till sunlight burns our crusts away, exposing veiled eyes to his day. How you shine for him alone, and yet we love you as our own. Paradox, it's true, you see, that all are one, there is no we. Sharing oneness all around, ah, that is how your love is found. Hence it lies with us to take the love you've shown for Baba's sake. Turn it round and pass it on, thus turning darkness into dawn. precious money, glowing bright, we wish we may, we wish we might, pay due heed to heavenly guides, which through compassion he provides. Selfless starlight, what a boon, in concert with pure Mara's moon. Left to right you shine for God, and center lovers on his nod. Homeward bound we're sure to go, inspired by your tandem glow. Money sweet, my words all melt, when what my heart from yours has felt. Thus in silence this remains, that love gift shared without word stains. Nonetheless, these heart-sown words I've flown to you as my songbirds, celebrating within rhyme that gift untouched by space and time. As they soar through mystic skies, for those who see with lovers' eyes, these last notes will spring like flowers across the night as cosmic showers. Thank you for the life you gave in being Baba's lifelong slave. Also for the light you are, still pointing toward the avatar. For giving all like you, dear friend, means love that lives beyond the end. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is a somewhat rambling commentary, which I've lifted from the preface and introduction to the previously videotaped book Roses. It has relevance just as well to fragrance. Baba said, works of art can ennoble and raise the consciousness of people. So said Meher Baba in a glowing testimony to the power of art. Expressing one's art, however, is by no means an effortless venture. The circumstances which give rise to it are a bed of roses in the ironic sense that a good rose bed requires ample dirt and manure. Transforming these crude elements into the bloom of art requires persistent care and nurturing by the artistic gardener, who must weed out resistance, keep harmful pests at bay, and selectively prune and water his prize so that it can not only survive in a competitive, often hostile environment, but flourish in the midst of it. This reminds me that Baba has said, art is divine. It can only rightly be expressed if opposed to bring out the inner beauty. In connection with that thought, while making no claims for their spiritual worth, I thank God that my perceptions and feelings have survived intact, even to the point of manifesting in book form. So then, the poetry and prose of this book are an outward expression and exposure of those deeply personal feelings and perceptions which have been tested by my environment and cultivated with care. The God-man Meher Baba loves poetry. He frequently quoted verse from a variety of great poets, and from an early age on through adulthood, he too authored poems. Furthermore, he inspired and on occasion directly ordered some of his lovers to write poetry. Seeds planted. Not unlike a number of others, my inspiration comes from him. I am very grateful that, unlike so much else which comes into expression through me, poetry can sometimes pass relatively unharmed from the inspiration point through the veils of my being and into existence. Naturally, these writings are flavored by my particular formation of sanskaras, but not, I feel, too unnaturally. At least this is my impression, if I may escape punishment for using that term. In both At the World's End and in Dust I Sing, the great poet Francis Brabazon does a splendid job of clarifying what the best poetry and poets are all about, as well as exposing that which is not worthy of any particular recognition. I think I'll interrupt here and read something from a blurb from the back of the Word at World's End by Francis. The poet laureate, they decide, shall be he who has best supplied them with their grunts, squeals, versified, in meters matching their short stride. Woo. Anyway, he didn't pull his punches. Now, where was I? Okay. Francis's remarkable perceptivity aside, it is my theory that you could randomly take 3 ardent poetry lovers, introduce them to the poetry of, say, Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, and one would feel greatly uplifted, a second would experience it as fair to middling, and the third person might react to it as nothing more than an ill-conceived jumble of hedonistic riddles. In short, the attitude and aptitude which the listener brings to a poem are very important, whether he or she is reading from a perfect one such as Rumi, or from a gross level being such as myself. So the main part, the purpose of the introduction, is to briefly acquaint the reader with my personal feelings for and relationship to poetry. Hopefully this will facilitate a free and natural basis for the understanding and assimilation of what is presented on the following pages. In actuality, this is a book about as well as of poetry. The extensive notes section, as well as other internal features, also work together to help serve the reader in this, as well as in other ways. In some of my writing, there is almost a nursery rhyme quality evident on the surface level. Adults who approach these poems with a childlike innocence and allow themselves to sink into the rhythm may be free to discover deeper levels of meaning. Those who approach them otherwise, for instance from a strictly academic perspective, will reach their own conclusions instead of reaching what is there. As a poet, I am essentially untrained. I have no desire to change that. The first poem I remember writing was when I was about 9 years old, and it was a transportive experience. I have a distinct memory of being totally absorbed in the unfoldment process. Looking back, I can see that even then it was not a case of trying to create something, but rather a feeling of something happening, something emerging. And as it came together, it was like discovering beautiful pieces for a wonderful puzzle. Then as now, there was a feeling of exhilaration and of beautiful discovery, everything manifesting in a very surprising, yet very natural way. With me, the creative process takes place in a participatory, not a passive fashion. Upon completion, a peaceful experience of completeness accompanied by continued joy and light is manifest. In retrospect, it is clear that this first poem was strongly archetypal, with symbolism that proved to be prophetic regarding my adult life's inner course. But that is another story. I go on to talk about different collections of poetries unpublished, the first being Wild Weeds, poems from 65 to 69. Spring Garden consists of poems from 1970, the year I first accepted the reality of God, to 75. That's followed by Roses. Then there was a subset of Battle of the Nexus that had a specific focus, and upcoming Fragrance. With very few exceptions, I have not consciously set out to write a poem. It is true that I have a tendency to think poetically, and I want to write, but I will not do so unless the spirit is there, so to speak. Hence, I compose no poetry by request, have no predetermined subject matter, nor do I set aside time for writing. It has to be there. Then and only then I write. It is only as it unfolds that I become increasingly aware of what it is that I am writing about. What starts out one way often ends up another. So then, these are not manufactured poems. I do not try to write anything, although intense concentration is usually necessary when the time arrives for composition. For most of my adult life, I have averaged maybe 2 poems a year, and some years none. And then I write, this can be quite painful for someone who thinks poetically and who could parade forth a sizable flow of socially acceptable verse at any given time. But I choose to follow his writing. Living verse springs to light when the gift of inspiration manifests. For me, writing poetry is a unifying experience. When joy and suffering are at peace with each other, they rise up from the heart and give voice through the head, and a poem is born. That is to say, joy and suffering in balance soar from the heart, formulate in the mind, and take birth in words. A few of my poems took years to complete, although that is rare. Others come in their entirety in a flash. One poem not included herein had been brewing for a couple of years but wouldn't come out. Then it did, all 170 lines, 85 rhyming couplets replete with several rhyme changes were completed in one sitting, and it was not necessary to change a single word, as I recall. I would not, however, describe the poetry process as easy, and to describe what actually takes place is in itself difficult. Nevertheless, here is a brief description of what usually happens. On their own, lines or a phrase will come which ring true, and a joyous anticipatory feeling is concomitantly present. Then keen concentration is necessary to listen internally. Next, playing with, working with what comes up puts it all together. If it doesn't, I drop it. Nothing can be forced. Countless times I've gotten out of bed during the night, impelled by a special feeling or phrase, only to return when it becomes evident that the poem will not evolve naturally. I never use a thesaurus, rhyming dictionary, or other aids. I do feel comfortable using a dictionary at times to check on definitions and spelling. Most of my recent poetry, I'm writing this in 1988, happens to rhyme, and a variety of meters and line arrangements are evident, but I do not set out to affect a certain type of poem. Neither is there any forethought of creating a particular style, although I've written sonnets and ghazals and different things have come forth. Neither is there any forethought to creating a particular style. As the poem unfolds, it becomes evident in the most natural way as to what shape it wishes to assume. It may sound silly, but despite being so internally immersed in poetry for so long, and despite being happy with what had been created, I never considered myself to be a poet. At the age of 40, on the day following Silence Day, it somehow became unquestionably clear. This does not indicate to me that those who chance to read my offerings will necessarily be in agreement. Refer to the 3 poetry lovers theory previously mentioned. Certainly there are those who will not resonate with my work for one reason or another, and that is all right. I do have something to suggest. Take the time to read the notes section in the back of the book to each poem. In some cases, they may be of considerable help in discovering different levels of meaning and in experiencing greater depth of meaning as well. I realize that it is rather unorthodox to have a notes section for a poetry book, let alone have an author's introduction of this kind, but I want my poems to be accessible. What is the point of filling up page after page with impenetrable imagery whose meaning remains obscure to all except a relative few? At the same time, a certain amount of honest mystery must be left to challenge the reader, and in mystical poetry in particular, various kinds of metaphor, imagery, and symbolism must stand on their own, as they are the lifeblood of the message and represent the lifeline to the divine. I have tried to find the right balance between too much and too little in the way of explanation. My apologies if I have not struck that balance for some readers. It is a very difficult thing to gauge. However, by placing the notes in the back of the book, one is more easily afforded the option of what he would or would not like to read about the poetry. For those who do choose to take advantage of what the notes section has to offer, reading them as introductions to the poems might prove to be a worthwhile approach. Some of these poems will reveal more of themselves upon repeated readings, especially when the reader is not predisposed to viewing these writings as being limited solely to the experiences of the author. Without such reviewer study, it could prove difficult to realize the full intentions of certain selections. But letting oneself go is probably the best single advice that could be given for absorbing and enjoying these offerings. Then one may sink into the rhythms to experience the current of being contained within. For even though the impact and atmosphere of these poems might be best received from a live reading by the author, it is entirely possible to experience them in a meaningful way via the printed page if one takes a little time and care. Have a footnote. Giving the poems only a cursory perusal runs the risk of forming the impression that self-absorbed experiences have been put in print for the sake of public catharsis and recognition, but this is not the case. In speaking of life without wandering afield from the subject of poetry, in my opinion, it is both a very horrible and most blessed time we live in. On the one hand, the Kali Yuga is in full sway, but it is immeasurably more significant that we are alive during the advent of the Avatar. Whether we know it or not, his manifestation has begun, and with it, as Francis Brabazon points out, are, quote, creators of new and fabulous forms of prayer, which eventually become the art at which men wonder and stare. This is a little bit about, well, I guess about my shyness and whether to say some things about myself personally or not. I maybe gave 2 public readings of my poetry in my 20s and didn't read again for another 20 years until I was 39, I think. So it must have been earlier. Must have been when I was 19 that I last read. And it's interesting because J.D. Salinger, who wasn't known for publicly speaking, lived in my hometown before I was there. He probably passed by my house daily as he went to the college in my hometown, because my house had the college campus in front of it and to the right of me. But that was due to my shyness. And I eventually, with some encouragement, I think at the age of 40, 39 or 40, began to read, but not much, and I read sparingly. I wish I had the humility level of Balna Tu. Balna Tu wrote on the back of one of his books, or had written. Balna, this is where people put their degrees and all the books they've read. And Balna Tu has no academic qualifications. He is neither widely read nor widely traveled. He is just an ordinary person who lives in a small Indian village, a place most dear to his heart. He has no ambition to be anybody special, for he feels that life at any point in time or in any place reveals its meaning and beauty abundantly. He prefers to be looked upon as a friend rather than a writer or a poet. He dislikes to be taught, but is ever willing to listen and learn. So naturally, he does not wish to teach or convince anyone about anything. However, he is happy to share in a free and friendly manner his way of life. Age is no bar to God's unconditional compassion, and anyone can converse intimately with him. Conversations with the Awakener is an attempt to share some of these moments. Baal writes, God loves those who stop teaching others, and God guides those who begin to understand others. So, a friend of mine, Bill Cliff, used to keep a statement from Baba on his piano as a reminder, and I try to remember it myself. And the statement goes like this. And it's Baba's message to people in the arts. Baba said, play not to the Gowrie or for the Sowry, but play instead to the God within. So it's a good thing for artists everywhere to remember. I mentioned earlier that these poems in the upcoming video book, Fragrance, are, in my opinion, hopefully, to be taken as atmospheric poems for a new humanity. And to me, the new life speaks to the gauge by which we can see if we're striving to live the new humanity or not. And apparently Mani felt similarly, because she wrote in the last family letter, the 82nd family letter, after everyone had come for Baba's darshan after he dropped the body in the spring of 1969, she wrote, in you younger ones, his boys and girls who formed the main body of this gathering, in you we heard the first strains of his new life song. From his ocean you brought to us a breath of the new humanity, which will awaken a dead world to his life. You who carried his message from heart to heart and land to land, who did not see his man form. It reminds me of Baba saying that the 1969 darshan would be his last in silence, and that after this he would give darshan, quote, every day. I will surely give darshan, and to my new ones, the young ones, I will give most to them. Mani could not help replying, but Baba, what about your old ones who have been waiting, longing for so long? Baba replied, yes, yes, they too, but mostly to my young ones. So this gauge by which one can evaluate whether they are trying to live, whether they are the beginning strains, the beginnings of a new humanity. Mani referenced the Song of the New Life. So she says, in the Song of the New Life, it says, if you are serious about living this new life, then wholeheartedly renounce this ephemeral existence. And it goes on, people can read it on their own. And this is another new humanity / new life sort of gauge, I feel. Baba said, this new life is endless, and even after my physical death, it will be kept alive by those who live the life of complete renunciation of falsehood, lies, hatred, anger, greed, and lust, and who, to accomplish all this, do no lustful actions, do no harm to anyone, do no backbiting, do not seek material possessions or power, who accept no homage, neither covet honor nor shun disgrace, and fear no one and nothing, by those who rely wholly and solely on God, and who love God purely for the sake of loving, who believe in the lovers of God and in the reality of manifestation, and yet do not expect any spiritual or material reward, and who do not let go the hand of truth, and who, without being upset by calamities, bravely and wholeheartedly face all hardships with 100% cheerfulness, and give no importance to caste, creed, and religious ceremonies. This new life will live by itself eternally, even if there is no one to live it. Now, this is a lot to ask of us, but remember Mani was saying the beginning strains of the new humanity is that the new life is emblematic of the beginning strains. I'll just give another example of those that didn't meet Baba. One time in the 1960s, two people, one from India and one from the Netherlands, two women decided they would stop by Guru Prasad and see if they could meet Baba for the first time. And one of the Mandali greeted them and said, "Let me ask Baba." And he came back and he said, "Good news." They had never met Baba. "Good news, you can both meet Baba one at a time." So the first one goes in, meets Baba, comes out, she's ecstatic, she's so happy, she's so moved. And but after she comes out, the Mandali comes back and says, "Baba's changed his mind, he decides you, the second person, can't see him. Sorry." And then she's crushed, and they leave. And the Mandali basically afterwards say, "Well, what's up?" And Baba says, "The first one was, of course, benefited. She got to see me and talk to me, and she's very happy. But the second one is more benefited, because I pricked her heart, and her longing for me will increase by leaps and bounds." So, anyway, that's that. Okay, hello again. I'm not a big fan of let's start over. Okay. I'm not a big fan of the self-promotion business, but after all these years, 34 years, I thought I'd share a bit of what those loving folks, the Mandali, said about a poem or two, all the while keeping in mind the following, as Kitty Davy notes in Love Alone Prevails. She said, "Experience teaches us to accept what Baba says, not necessarily as a personal fact, but often as a pointer towards which he desires us to aim. I feel the same can also be true of the Mandali's bestowal of praises upon us." So I kept diaries for all of my 21 India pilgrimages, and these are quotes from the Mandali about just one of the poems. Merwan Erich's brother greeted me today by saying, "The great poet, wonderful poem." When he said wonderful poem, he said it very deeply. After reading today's poem, Man Overboard, he again said wonderful poem with the same tone. Dr. Gower called it beautiful. She also referred to me again as Baba's poet. When she first said this to me a week before, she took my hand in hers and looked me straight in the eye before speaking. Also, upon leaving Merazad today, Mani commented on my poetry from last Sunday. That was when I read Life Sentence. She said it was beautiful. Erich made comments and others as well. Gower's first response was as follows. She took my hand and said, "Baba's poet, you have a gift. What a wonderful poem. Beautiful, really good. Baba has given you something inside. Yeah." So, notes to the poem. I'll just read an excerpt of notes to the poem. This poem, Life Sentence, came to me as I was waking up on Christmas morning in 1994. And it's just another one of your typical Hallmark card holiday rhymes about prison life, Holy Communion, and death, all in a symbolic sense, of course. Life Sentence. How lucky that I've fallen into this world of yours, now that I'm giving up on that funhouse world of doors. Those days before your pardon, I begged to see the light, while every door I opened shone different shades of night. These days I begged the warden to take away that show, to lock up all escape routes and keep me lying low. Yes, now I'm here in shackles, since he gave me his word in silence, which is golden, and through which he is heard. What's left is just the struggle of ego to survive, but I've got his assurance I won't get out alive. He grinds the grain of gross self to flour in his mill, then pounds the dough till finished and sets it on the sill. And when this bread has risen, he bakes it till it's done, then slices it to pieces, consuming it anon. He next takes heart and cuts up this organ into bits, producing plaintive music until one calls it quits. The liquid distillation that follows in its wake gives wine that's fit for drinking and is drunk for heaven's sake. Who is the one who swallows? Who is the one who's gone? Who takes the awesome beating? Who sings the bloody song? The one who gives communion, just read between the lines, is all in one, none other, for he indeed presides. The one who takes communion, as laid out in these lines, is also one, none other, for he indeed resigns. How lucky that I've fallen upon his killing knife, that I might die forever and gain eternal life. I wrote a sister piece called I Can't Live, but it's one of those poems that really is best understood by reading, and I'm just not going to bother with it right now. Plus my writing needs to be rewritten more clearly. So these are my notes to a poem called He Has Given Me. One day after sharing a poem in Mandalay Hall, Dr. Goher spoke seriously with me, and among other things, said, Baba has given you something inside. Yeah. 2 years later now, it triggered this poem, which I now dedicate to her. He has given me. He has given me something, some true awareness and appreciation for that which is completely beyond me, yet is completely within me and within all. And if I had the wherewithal, I would withdraw from the incompleteness of my mind to where the completeness of his being flows unbounded. Now that would be something. So this poem is called Him, meaning Baba, H-I-M. And the notes to the poem say, the perfect master Jalaluddin Rumi said, love is the reality and poetry is the drum that calls us to it. The following poem picks up on this theme in that it is all about attuning our hearts to the poetry of his name. By doing this, we can create within our hearts drumbeats of divine yearning. In turn, this sets the rhythm for the development of each one's personal love song. And it is this singing which will in time awaken him within. I am calling this composition hymn, H-I-M, but also in certain parts of the poem it can be referred to as H-Y-M-N, hymn. Both are a perfect fit. To make the point another way, wholeheartedly embodying and giving voice to the one hymn, H-I-M, unerringly leads to the other hymn, H-Y-M-N. And for the lover, this means everything. Hymn, H-I-M. And now the poem. This is the poem Hymn. I remember. Oh, I remember how it was when you first came to me. You turned me inside out back then, so I could start to be the real thing that I am when nothing here remains. And toward that end, you next began to scrape away my stains. You also set about the work of tearing up my past by cutting out resistant strains that self-indulgence cast. Well, is it any different, friends, with any lover's life? For can you name a single one who spared his gleaming knife? Perfection must redeem its fold, and we, pray tell, are that. So step up to the plate, brave hearts, and be his welcome mat. It's early yet, and yet it's late, so get in sync through timing, which is achieved through his name's praise, set to one's heart a rhyming. It's him, of course, of whom I speak, yet speech must be concluded, for praising him means we must live where mere words are excluded. It's then, in silence, one shall hear the real word always longed for, and know within, without constraint, it's him I've made this song for. So sing your song by tuning in to Mayher's wish and whim, for living life in harmony begins and ends with him. Yes, I remember who it was who gave me everything, and by so doing blessed my life and taught it how to sing. Eventually the day will come when through him I will go. Until that time, to sing his praise is all I've come to know. Yet in a heartbeat I repeat, his name reveals his glory. So sing along in rhythmic song of him and his love story. This next one is called Pain of Love. And let's see. And this is the introduction to it, or part of it. This short poem is called Pain of Love, and it is about how we have to hit the dusty trail, become like dust, in order to receive what Baba wants to give us. Yes, we've been issued our marching orders, but only after standing at attention can one hear them properly. And only after that can one proceed in the direction that he wishes. Once heard, however, it behooves the warrior in his cause to dutifully respond with, quote, "Your wish is my command," regardless of the pain that this might entail. Having thus given in to the commander-in-chief, he can then give out his real gift, himself. For Baba has said, "Everything is mine except myself. Myself is for those who love me. Love me, love me, love me, and you will find me." The introduction is longer than the poem. Pain of love. This pain of love on wings of dove descends to live within us. It's nesting there till we're aware that it has come to win us to acceptance of our losing all except him. For yes, we must become like dust in order to receive him. So therefore cry with all your heart to lose the life you're living, and in pain's stead, where you have bled, you'll gain the gift he's giving. Have a footnote. The title and the first line only came on this date, whatever date that was that it was written. The rest was written on the 25th anniversary of Baba's car accident. I was unaware of this at the time, speaking of the pain of love. I think I might mention this in another poem. I had several poems in a row that the first line in the title came to me, and then quite a bit, like weeks, months later, the rest of the poems would come. Don't know why. Okay, this one is called Honestly Speaking, written in 1997. And there's an introduction to it, which I'm going to read. Francis Brabazon, whom Baba reportedly called the greatest contemporary poet, wrote, "I feel that the whole subject of man and woman is one of absolutely prime importance. In fact, that the principal cause of present world chaos is not economical or sociological, but is because of an almost complete loss of real knowledge regarding the essential relationship of men and women. Attraction is so pleasurable that the real issue of a man and a woman being but components of one person, and that each through the other can actually make the way to God realization, is lost sight of." End of quote. Another highly instructive message relative to the theme of this poem is Baba's gem, "My Dear Children," which states in part, "I have come to remind all people that they should live on earth as the children of one Father." Also, allow me now to weave the words of caution and wisdom into the fabric of a personal story, which this poem highlights, sharing the following. Once upon a time in Mehrabad, a female Baba lover and I enjoyed a wonderful and deep connection for 3 indelible weeks. However, upon returning to our respective places in the West, this sweet relationship rapidly soured due to the embittering after effects of infatuation and other problematic communication immaturities. Then years later, we were cast together again, this time at the Myrtle Beach Center. And within just a few days' time, Baba turned the tide and helped us wash away our differences, replacing them with, well, let the poem tell the tale. Honestly speaking, I love you, you love me. Meher Baba, that makes 3. All the same, there's no crowd. 2 for 1 here is avowed. From the start, we could be in his rhythm naturally. Then there came Maya's cloud, setting in as spirit's shroud. 7 years quietly turned our faces, dropped the key. Then he cleared what was fouled, 5 days working, all allowed. What a joy to be free, love rebalanced, God's mercy. New life sown where we'd plowed, hardened soil with heads bowed. Now afresh we could see our connection beautifully. Trust and love, truth uncowed, this our kinship he's endowed. Father, Lord, that's how we, brother, sister, came to thee. Left the right to be proud, heard you speaking, not out loud. Yes, it's true, honestly. Your words come through silently. All praise be to our beloved Baba. Amen. Okay, this one is called the midnight special. Baba had talked elsewhere in Sparks of the Truth, it's recorded, I believe, about the fastest way to God is through the special train that's connected right to the engine, not the one that stops at every little podunk town along the way. And I call that train the midnight special, because he takes his veil oftentimes. God, what's become of time? The hours all seem to blend between my morning prayers and those at evening's end. I do not know the way except to bow my head, so that he might accept my deeds and all I've said. All thoughts as well I give for him to take away. With these three things removed, my Lord can have his say. That's how my days go by, like train cars in the night, fast tracking through this dream that is the lover's plight. He engineers my life to bypass where I've been and stay online with him, averting sidetracks din. And though I hold him up, he never lets me down. Despite the crap I give, he takes without a sound. For when I turn my head to see what's left behind, he stops the train and waits until I have resigned. Thank God I stay on board till once again we wheel across the dark mirage that I mistake as real. Amazing that he still allows me on this ride, and more amazing yet, he keeps me by his side. This training at his feet has led to all I know. He is my engineer, and I his escargot. Therefore it's clear that I must give in ceaseless prayer all garbage I've accrued, and that his love must bear, for good and bad alike, are veils upon our eyes, until they're left with him to help us realize that he alone exists and steers our way back home aboard his special train. Thus ends this prayerful poem. Okay, this is the last one for today. It's called Heart Attack. Uncannily and unexpectedly, your mystical familiarity ignites a storm of arrows fiery, as beauty wings forth with authority. Invisibly they reach their mark in me, incinerating through their mastery a holy path into the treasury, which is my heart now burning to be free. Its walls are rent, and automatically my silent praise springs with alacrity upon the heels of piercing agony which you bestowed in generosity. In madness born from perfect targetry, my breaking heart reveals your artistry through streams of love which you have pointedly released to rejoin sea's divinity. But then this moment inexplicably eludes my grasp, and inconsolably my life slips back into normality to carry on amidst insanity. And yet the imprint of the memory of precious times beyond time's boundary reveals beloved's constant company right here and now, despite all misery. So never mind the mind's charade I see. I weather that in heart's sweet reverie, and find him ever present subtly within my daily life most naturally. But when he once again capriciously lets fly the lightning of his weaponry, the same which captured me originally, I feel the rapture of his majesty. That's how his game, though played myopically, descends directly from eternity, inflames the heart, which weeps abundantly, and leads it home to his infinity. Thank God on high for his persistency. Yep, that's all, folks. I thought, I like to think everybody has their own sort of rhythm. And in poetry, with people that write poetry, it comes out many times with the same meter, in the same sort of, I don't know what else to say about it. But what's the woman poet from Amherst, Massachusetts? I used to drive by her house every day. She was a recluse, famous poet, Emily Dickinson. An English lover, Bob, a friend of mine, said that every poem of hers, you could sing the yellow rose of Texas to. And sure enough, I found it was true. So he also said that I wrote in an unusual meter, dactylic something or other, and loose iambic. I haven't studied poetry, but I looked it up after he said that, and I guess I often do. But the meters do vary. I do use different meters, and some blank verse, some free verse, but mostly it's rhymes, and many of them are of the same meter. So.